practical takes us through the steps required to create a presentation piece as shown here. We have a piece of paper with a background image, we have an overlay of thumbnail images, a nicely spaced out kerned title and text which is coloured to be the inverse of the background colour. So a fairly basic presentation, but quite a slick appearance overall. The piece of software we're going to use for this is Adobe InDesign. The practical which is taught within the CAD suite takes place on PageMaker, but limited number of licenses means that we can't actually teach it on InDesign. So having been to the practical, you should be able to attempt this in your own time using Adobe InDesign. InDesign is the more up-to-date piece of software, so it would make sense to actually produce your work in InDesign. You should have downloaded the resources and the materials for the practical from Blackboard for use in the next few minutes. So we start off by setting up the piece of paper. If we go to File, New, Document, we need to choose the size of paper. The default size here is A4, but the orientation at the moment is portrait. We want a landscape, and the margins are reasonably well sized there, but I'm going to change it to 15 millimeters. Let's just have a look at that again actually. Now I'm setting the margins. When you're setting the margins in InDesign, if you want all the margins to be the same size, you can use the lock icon. It looks like a chain that's kind of broken. If you click the icon, it shows a locked chain. Click 15, all down will change. And click OK. Now I need to resize this window slightly to fit in the working area. A bit more, a bit smaller. Got quite a limited amount of screen space available with the screen capture software. You should try and work out your presentation on paper first. This helps you establish where your guidelines should go. I'm going to add guidelines, horizontal ones first. So all you do is move your cursor up to the ruler, click, hold and drag downwards, and that gives you a guideline. Now in the control area up top, you can determine where that guideline goes. Now this is a feature only of InDesign, where we can actually type a number and this will put the guideline at the correct position. So I'm going to place one at 140. Let's add another one. So you drag it in. You can try and put it at the right position by watching the number change, but it's much easier to just overtype the number. So one at 140, one at 180. These are the top and the bottom of the thumbnail images. Bring in another one. Let's put one at 20. So I'm establishing a 5mm gap between my margin and the top of my text. Next one in is going at 25. So that's the 5mm gap for the text. We then need another guideline to give us 5mm below the text, so this guideline goes in at 30. And the last horizontal one is to go in at 135, so we get 5mm between the bottom of the text and the thumbnail images. So you click and drag over the number and change it to 135. That's the horizontal ones set up. Let's try the vertical ones now. I'm going to drag one in, and I want to put this at 29. Drag another one in. This one goes to 189. Because these are vertical guidelines, they're only getting the X axis that you can change. Drag the last one in, and I want to change this one to 269. Very easy. You can, if you want to change the position of one, click the guideline, you'll see it changes to a slightly different tone of blue. You could then reposition or retype the location for it. Let's save your file at this stage. I'm just going to call it poster, just so we don't lose it. InDesign has got just the same kind of control that you have in Photoshop, and one of the best features is layers. Now the layers panel at the moment seems to be hidden, just slightly out of view in that position. Before I move that out, I'll reduce the height of the layers panel so we can fit it in. We should manage to get both of these control panels in that respect. Okay. I'm going to create a new layer that holds our background. So I go to the new layer icon. I'm going to rename this layer. So if you double click the layer, I'm going to call it background. If I can spell it right. Okay, the color of the layer is quite handy, and this means that any object placed on that layer will get a red outline. Helps you on a more complex setups. Background is the current layer. I'm going to bring in a background image now. We're going to bring in the background image from the shared drive. This will be the image that you've downloaded from MyDundee. When you're viewing images in InDesign, you may find that the images come in and look very, very pixelated. Now that's because the settings within the software, if I go to Edit, Preferences and Display Performance, the settings may be set to be fairly low quality. You should make sure the software is showing high quality throughout, otherwise you can't see what you're actually going to end up with. This may involve closing the file as it is, changing these settings and then reopening the file. Okay. Right, so if we go to File, Place, so it's slightly different to other software. File to place for the background is Future Systems Background.jpg. Click Open, and we want to place the image in the top corner. Our cursor here will gravitate and kind of snap into that top corner. So when you think you're covering the top corner, select and drag away. I'm dragging away until you feel it kind of snap into the bottom corner of the margins. Okay, the image is here, but it's not currently filling the frame. This red line here indicates that it's on layer background, but the image is tiny. It needs to be told to fit the frame. So if you right click, go to Fitting, Fit Content to Frame. Very easy. Because we've done that in a fairly arbitrary fashion to fill the background, there will obviously be some distortion of the original image. But it is, bear in mind, it is a background image, and a lot of it will be obscured. Let's create another new layer, this time for the thumbnail images. I'm going to retype the layer name, call it Thumbnails, and click OK. We maybe need to zoom in a bit closer this time to see what's going on. So I'm going to use the zoom tool, and using your left mouse button, getting a bit closer on that area. The layer ready so we can place our thumbnails in, but at the moment, if we placed an image in, it would swap with the background because the background image is still active. You need to click your move tool and click in the background white area. That takes away that object being current. Let's go and get the file and bring it in to the design. So file, place, future systems 1.jpg, open. I'm basically going to pick fairly arbitrarily. I'm just going to click and drag. Now, this may seem fairly tricky, but once you get used to the method, it's actually very, very easy to control. Now, the distance between the vertical distance between these two horizontal guides is 40 millimeters. The overall distance between this vertical guide and the one at this end is 6 times 40 millimeters is 240 millimeters. So we've got 6 images that we want to fill in here. Each one will be 40 millimeters by 40 millimeters. So in the control area, there's a lot more going on now. We've got a lot more control over this specific object. First thing to set is the width and the height. Now, we could lock these together because they are both supposed to be 40 millimeters. So place the lock on, type 40. Actually, that was incorrect. Shouldn't have had a lock there because that maintained the proportion. So no lock on, 40 and 40. So we've got the right size, but it's not in the correct position yet. So let's do this very accurately. We have a control icon here, and the dot determines where the coordinates will be calculated from. So if we said the bottom corner, then actually this bottom corner should be at 180 and 29. So if you type those in, the object will move accordingly. So it goes to 29 and it goes to 180. Type in your number, move into another box and click, and it will move. The alternative to that with a grid is that with the guidelines it will gravitate to it, but we don't have guidelines at every 40 millimeter breakup. So numerically you've got a bit more control. Right, let's try and get the image to fill the box. If you right click, fit content proportionally, you don't want to distort your image. If I fitted it to the frame, it was going to distort too much. So I'm fitting the content proportionally. The next stage takes a bit of practice, but it's very, very powerful. What we do is we move to the second tool. Okay, it's a slightly different. This is you're not changing the object, you're changing the contents of the object. So we move to the second pointer. We get this hand symbol. Click and move the picture. And you notice that the original green frame acts as a clipping frame. It chops off stuff. So it's very easy now to resize the object. You need to hold down the shift key to make sure you maintain the proportions. I hope you can see how that actually works. So you've got much more control over selecting the bit that's interesting in the image. I'm happy at that. Move back to the original move tool and then click in the white area to prevent any further modification of that image. It can all be changed again later on if you're unhappy the way the pictures stick together. Okay, let's put in the next one. File, place, Future Systems 2, open. Well, before I open it, you can see that this is a very long image. we're going to really be trying to select a 40mm by 40mm worth of that image. So click open. I'm going to put it in arbitrarily, just as we did before. I'm going to resize the overall frame 40, 40, and then move it into position. So this grid guideline is at 29, that position must be 69. So X will be 69 and Y will be 180 again. Exactly in position, just where we wanted it. Change to the other tool. So before you change to the other tool, do the fitting exercise. Fitting, fit content proportionally, just to make sure it's in proportion. Now move to the other tool. This time I'm going to place it down at the bottom of the frame, then hold down Shift and resize till this marker touches the guideline. I've gone slightly over the guideline just to make sure. Now I'm just sliding it along until I see the bit of the image that I find the most interesting. The contrast between the new and the old there is probably the most telling part of the image. Back to your move tool, click in the white area. Time to bring in the next one. This image has a vertical emphasis. Click open. Once again, put it in fairly random. Width 40, height 40. So the frame is in correct position, it's correct size. The Y coordinate will be 180. The X coordinate will be 109. Right click over the image, fitting, fit content proportionally. We can now move to the second tool, click the image once, hold down Shift, and you can resize the width until it fills the 40mm box. You can, with it active in the purple mode, you can type in 40 to make sure it exactly fits. What you should do there though is have the proportion setting active. Okay, if I slide it downwards, maybe have it and expose a bit of sky in that one. Move back to the move tool, click once, bring in the next one. Future Systems 4, click open. I'm going to place it fairly randomly. Width goes to 40, height goes to 40. Location, the Y coordinate will be 180. The X coordinate will be 149. Right click, fit content proportionally, select the modify tool, click the image once. I'm going to force the height to be 40mm. So if I lock the proportions, 40, return. So it's as high as it can be. I can now move that down till it clips, till it snaps to the frame. Very nearly there. 2 more to place. Go to your Move tool, activate the white area, File, Place, Future Systems 5, Open, click and drag, resize the frame. Now I have to watch out there because I'd left the proportion lock on, so I need to change that back. It's very subtle little tweaks here that make quite a big difference. Okay, let's put it into position. So 180 and 189. Remember that 189 was the grid, the guideline that we put in. Right click, fitting, fit content proportionally. Go to your modify tool, click it once, lock the proportions, set the height to 40. We can then move that into position. Not much to see there, beautiful rendered view of glass though. And let's capture the curve and the people. Okay, one more image to put in. Move tool, click in the white, File, Place, Future System 6, Open, click and drag. Careful, the proportion lock is still on there. So 40, 40, right click, fitting, fit content proportionally. And now we want to move the object, so I've selected the object, move it down onto the 180 guideline, and this should be at 229. Perfect. So a bit of pre-planning for the guidelines makes a big difference. I'm going to zoom and then zoom out a bit to view what I've got. If you hold down the Alt key, you'll get a minus symbol which lets you zoom outwards. Very tidy.